Anthony, I'll just pick and choose. He's a general accountant, has a Bachelor of Social Work, he's a Master's of Social Work, he's a PhD. He provides quality assessment, analysis, and clinical support for medical cases. He consults in personal injury, civil litigation, criminal law, family matters. Anthony, I think he's also in the, you know, that program, Smartest People in Canada? I think he's in the top 30 of that now as well. So what his IQ is, significant, I guess. What else has he done here? He's Aboriginal First Nations focused. He's an advocate and specialized clinical support of First Nations people at the Technical Institute. Hang in there, guys, just bear with me. Department head at Tyndale College. Director of Clinical Services at a rehabilitation place in Newmarket. He's a consultant clinician, Brampton Counseling Services. I hear Elvis. Throw guys in the back row. Elvis is good though. I like it. Associate social worker and social clinician. He's an adjunct professor. He's a professor of social work, executive director at a Institute for Studies in Social Inclusion in Toronto. I could go on and on and on because obviously his background is quite varied. But without any delay or further ado, I'm going to. Where is Anthony anyway? There you are, Anthony. You scared me. I'm like, what? Okay. So please welcome Dr. Anthony Hutchinson.
Good morning, Miigwech. How's everybody on Friday morning on the last day of a conference when you all want to go home? You know, it's funny. As I woke to the dawn of a new government of Ontario. Of course, we get a majority with 38.5%. I'm not sure what we would do if those were kind of like pension numbers, but the reality is 38.5%. Interestingly enough, when I did my PhD, the topic of my PhD was what percentage or proportion of politics or the government in power contributes to the health and well-being of Ontarians. That's what my PhD was in 2006. And it's interesting that the Liberal government is in power with 38.5%. Guess what percentage contributes to the sickness of the province of Ontario based on basically a statistical mathematical model? 38.5%. So I just think that's awesome. Right? So there you go. Just proves my thesis was in fact correct. It's been cool kind of hanging out. I want to thank WP for inviting me here, especially for Ilya, who I see as a very inspiring leader in terms of leadership, in terms of bringing financial literacy, probably more than anything else. I know it's pensions and benefits, but one of the things you'll hear in my presentation is I do talk about financial literacy. And it's just a key determinant of health that I will address in my presentation. And you know, I mentioned earlier, I was mentored to somebody earlier, I was mentored by Charlie Coffey, who's an executive, was an executive vice president of Royal Bank of Canada, and he mentored me from about 2004 through 2006. And he basically brought banking to Aboriginal communities to make it accessible, you see, and to give financial empowerment to Aboriginal. And he was given the Order of Canada for that. So I think at some point we should probably nominate Ilya to be for an Order of Canada because if Charlie can get one. And that being said, you know, some people say, you know, they changed from WP, so you know now we're not going to remember that it's Watson Parojcic who did this. But in terms of that, I want to say that, you know, Parojcic is the Serbian name, so just think of, I don't know if any of you watch the news, you know, there's been some really crazy things going on in Serbia with the flooding and so forth. So remember and send good energy to Ilya's ancestry relatives back there. That'd be awesome, right? It's a blessing to be here this morning. I'm going to be talking about healthy kids, healthy parents, healthy families, right? And that being said, I want to say that everyone has a story. And as a presenter, I often infuse a little bit of my own story into some of my presentations. I do have a lot of material to cover. I'm going to hopefully get through all of it. I think I have 90 minutes, Ilya, or 2 hours? 90 minutes. 90 minutes? Sure. Okay. So, and I'm going to leave some time, hopefully, for questions and answers, a fair deal of time. you know, just because like I'm this academic and other things, which, you know, you might have heard about, you know, I'll get to that in a second. But I basically want to say that, you know, each and every one of you has a story. And each and every one of you could be up here, you know, speaking, or each and every one of you could be up in front of a university class, or and I speak right across this country. I'm on TV, all this radio, newspapers, and, you know, each and every one of you can do that, because I'm just no different, right? I'm just one of you. I am woman. Hear me roar. And so, you know, and so I'm going to share a little bit about that, because I think maybe sometimes, you know, you go and hear these speakers. I know they got all these kinds of stories and stuff, and I remember, you know, when I'm on speaking circuit, sometimes I get to, you know, hang out with celebrities, and I'm on the same stage with, you know, athletes and Olympians and people from television and you know, Adam Beach, remember him, you know, Adam Beach. And so we'll be on the same speaking circuit and the same conference. And I kind of show up, and people go, "But where's your book?" And I'm still trying to get around to writing it. You know, where's your TV show? Well, I'm always a guest, right? So you know, so the thing is that, you know, as I consider these kinds of things, and I look, you know, and I basically, oh no, I'm just a kind of a regular Joe, and I can do it. Anybody else can do it. And I think that's what the takeaway message is going to be as I kind of share some of this stuff. And so. You know, so we're going to get to it, and we're going to just share a little bit of what it means to, you know, be healthy kids, healthy parents, healthy families, and we'll probably get to the end, which basically says that laughter is a really good thing, right? Probably more than anything else in terms of facilitating health. So let's kind of, in terms of what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at, just to give you an overview, some objectives to the presentation, you know, an outline, and then the other bio, right? The one that's not so, that people read about, and this professor and blah, 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 blah. First of all, we're going to look at a holistic view of health, and I will, you know, I'll get to what that means. We're going to take it to the broadest sense. I think, you know, a lot of us, we think of health, we think of doctors, we think of hospitals, you know, we think of liberal governments cutting, or, you know, or conservative government cutting, or whatever. But it's, in terms of health, I conceive as these 7 interrelated areas that I've engaged with in my 15 years of clinical practice, and I call it a social determinants of health framework. What that really means is it's basically the 75% of components that contribute to the health and well-being of people that are beyond just biomedical. And that's the reality, that actually what contributes to health are more elements than simply, you know, medicine, doctors, nurses, hospitals, right? And that might seem intuitively, a lot of you might know that, but that's not where our funding goes. We know in Canada, almost half of our federal budget goes to doctors and hospitals, that kind of thing, right? It doesn't go to all of the other elements that contribute to health. And the same thing goes for the province of Ontario as well, right? Because it's just a microcosm of the federal system, right? Sorry, where's my water? Oh, it's right there. Okay. It had legs. Now, I practice across 7 areas. So that might seem overwhelming. 7 is a number of perfection, and I'd like to believe that I'm aspiring to that. So, so basically, brain health, community health, family health, and so forth. You can see them on the screen. Each one of those elements is actually tied to what one of my vocations is. And one of the things, if people say to me, "Anthony, what do you do?" And I look at them and go, "Do you want to go for a drink?" Because the reality is, if they, you know, it will take that long to explain, you know, kind of what I've done. I did 20 years of school, and I kept doing different things each year. Right? So you know, some people can say, "Well, does that mean you're a jack of all trades and master of none?" No, I've mastered a few of them, actually, believe it or not. But again, you know, acquired brain injury expert, an epidemiology, which is a fancy name, public health, for lack of a better word, what makes us in the widest sense. Some of you might not know I'm a national gang expert in Canada here. And in terms of you know, looking at these dimensions, right? As I look at these, people say to me, how can you like package this? How can you say this simply? So what I did is I basically, I'm a finalist for Canada's Smartest Person, and they wanted me for Canada's Smartest Person to be able to say in 2 minutes or less what I actually do. So I'll just quickly show you the video to hopefully get it over and done with.
Hi, I'm Anthony Hutchinson,
also known as Doc H. And these are 5 reasons why I'm Canada's smartest person. I am smart in Canadian music. I am smart in brain health and concussion treatment. In considering chronic traumatic encephalopathy, we can understand how the brain's gray matter undergoes cumulative degeneration once brain injury has occurred, no matter how minor the injury. I am smart in Canadian multiculturalism. My mother was the daughter of an Arawak Indian who married a South Asian beverage merchant. My father was the great-grandson of a Scotsman from the Sky Islands, as well as a Nigerian woman of the Igbo and Yoruba tribes. My dad was also the grandson of a Berber farmer from Morocco and a Sephardic Jewish woman from Spain. Can you say Heinz 57? I am smart in Canadian economics and deficit reduction strategies. If every Canadian in the country were given just once in their lifetime a tax rebate of $1 million in Canadian A money, and then the federal government quickly taxed everyone at 95%, the deficit could be eliminated before anyone ever notices. I am smart in relationship counseling. To achieve ideal romantic relationship benchmarks, it's good to balance engaging sparkly things along with good personal hygiene. So, Doc H saying, and those are 5 reasons why I'm Canada's smartest person. Okay, so there you go, and basically I'm going to fix this mic here. It was funny when I saw it, has anybody heard of Canada's smartest person? Has anybody heard of that? Is this microphone okay now? Is it okay? Too loud? Hello? Yeah, okay. So basically when I applied for that, oh, I know why. Sure. I'm also a sound tech. So when I applied for Canada's smartest person, you know, and we sent them the video, they go, it was rated, there were 60,000 applications, it was the #1 video in the country. So I think that was kind of cool, you know, in terms of the feedback I got, and so now I'm hopefully going to be a finalist on the show. It went from 60,000 roughly applicants to about 50, and now they get to 32, so I'm in the 50, somewhere in there. So you might see me in the fall, and if you don't, it means I wasn't Canada's smartest person. But that's my vocations in less than 2 minutes, and we're going to do this. Oh, do this. Okay, so in terms of some of the objectives that we're going to cover, I'm going to try to simplify, make fun, make transparent, some not so fun, not so simple, kind of complex stuff that hopefully you will take back to your workplaces. You do deal in pensions and benefits and things like that. People's health, you actually deal in people's health. You deal with monetary things. You know, the #1 issue in people's health is actually finances and money, right? Which will actually show that. You deal in the workplace. The workplace is in fact one of the #1 things that contributes to people's health. And you also, and so actually in top 5 things here actually, and you go back and deal with, I believe, families, correct? Yes. Yeah, which is also very important for health, people's health, right? I know that those things are difficult to comprehend sometimes, but you know, work, money, and families, we engage with them a lot, don't we? Not really. And then we speak the rest of the time. In terms of making and simplifying things, we're going to try to make things a little transparent in terms of some of the risks, so you're just aware of them. I don't want to depress you. One of the things, sometimes, you know, as a university professor, students come and they sit in my class, and you know, if any of you understand, you know, who've gone to university, what university is really about the first 4 years is unlearning everything you never learned in high school, to criticize and be critical of the world. And then after you are depressed and miserable, because we all know that university leads to depression and so forth, right? The sociology of the world, the human condition, all that kind of stuff. Then you go off and you try and better the world in some vocation. So you go into a teaching degree. And you try to teach people literacy to help people get better. Or you do medicine, or you do social work. You do some kind of post undergrad degree, right, to make things better. That's the model. You get miserable for 4 years, and then you try and fix it. Some people go and become lawyers after. I'll leave that there. Now, it's going to hopefully give you a holistic kind of comprehensive framework, and then I'm going to, of course, I got hopefully some practical tips. If they're not practical enough, we'll have time for Q&A at the end. Okay. First of all, what do we mean by healthy? We're going to look at that. What are some of the key risks, as I mentioned? What do we mean by healthy parents? What do we mean by healthy kids? What do we mean by healthy families? And then just, again, some concluding reflections and then the Q&A. But first, I'm going to give you a little bit about me, just so you kind of realize that I'm not your typical presenter. Okay, I'm not the typical presenter with all these, I didn't, come with all these accolades and so forth. So I was born to multicultural parents, as you saw in the video. My mother was indigenous to South America. She was Arawak Indian. And interestingly enough, as much as we talk about the plights of First Nations people, the Arawaks were decimated. You cannot find one anymore pretty much in the Americas, which is a real tragedy. You can still find some Caribs. You can, again, they went along. You can still even find some Mayans, for example. You could find some Incas. But the Arawaks were completely decimated. And so that's part of my legacy. When my mom first came to Canada in about 1957, she did become a teacher, a school teacher, and the first thing that they did is they put her to, the only place she could get a job to teach was on a First Nations reserve in a HOUSTIC. And that was interesting because she would go there, spend the whole week there. They would have to drive her on a four-wheel drive to a remote airfield, fly her over, then put her in a canoe, put her in the canoe over, and then she would stay there and teach. And so, she really instilled First Nations values in me. She would do that for the week, and then come back and stay in the city, and that's what she did week after week after week after week. And she would instill the things that she learned from First Nations communities in me as I grew up as her firstborn. And then she also worked in the Chilliwack with the First Nations there. So that being said, I was raised in a very violent and abusive home with my dad and my mom. My dad was an alcoholic. They split up when I was about 3. I remember everything. From the time, it's amazing, people say, well, can you remember things back when you were 3 and 4? The answer with some people is yes, some people is no, right? In my case, it was yes. And at the age of 6, I was already a messed up, troubled kid. I was actually labeled mentally retarded by my school system. The school social worker, I was in the back of the class, I couldn't see very well something on the board. Then the social worker tested me in the hallway, and she basically said, "You're retarded," And I said, "Okay." And so they took me to the school board headquarters where I met with a school board psychologist. Now they say like developmentally delayed and all that. They have all this politically correct language. Back then they didn't have that. And so I'm in the school board headquarters with this guy, and he must be smart because he has a PhD, you see. And he's a psychologist. So I sat there, and he tested me with his PhD, and then he looked at me after he tested me, and he said, "You are indeed retarded." And I thought, well, I must be retarded because he's a really smart guy because he has like this foot, and PhD spells foot. And so, just in case some of you aren't phonetically inclined. And so basically, as he did that, I said, wow. So I got labeled as this retarded kid going through school, special needs, if you will. And I didn't think I could learn, because I was told I couldn't. I was pretty much functionally illiterate right up until grade 10, until I finally met a school teacher who looked at me and goes, "You're not actually retarded. You're just a jerk." Anyway, so I figured that out, and so basically, now that being said, when you're labeled this way and you're treated bad going through school and you're getting beaten at home, what do? You can grow up as a messed up, kind of angry kid. At some point, I remember I was 14 years old. I went into a sporting goods store. I stole a gun. And the first guy who basically came up to me and said, "Hey man, hey retarded kid," and I just turned around, pointed my gun at him, and he stopped calling me retarded. So I basically, realized that there was some kind of false power. I didn't realize it was false power at the time, but there was false power in having a handgun. And then, of course, I went and got another gun. And after you're a 14-year-old kid with guns, people pay a lot more attention to you. And then, of course, I sort of became a leader in terms of gang kind of activities, dealing drugs, shooting people. Yes, indeed, shooting people is public knowledge. And I was just on the wayward path. And by the time I was 15, I got arrested finally, because a lot of young kids think that they're really smart, but they think they know everything, right? And of course we don't, and especially if we're young men. And so basically, I ended up having a probation officer and a youth worker who began to work with me, and they began to mold and mentor me. Now, even though they tried, it didn't make it right away, but it did give me a model for the work that I do today, right? That mentorship sows the seed. So even if you don't see instant gratification right away, the difference that we make in the lives of young people may pay dividends. I always say, if that one person, if that one youth worker or that one teacher didn't invest in me, I would not go on to invest to advise the Prime Minister of this country, which I have done, impacting 30 million people in this country, right? I would, in a positive way, I would not have gone on to help launch the City of Vancouver's drug prevention strategy to help prepare for the 2010 Winter Olympics, which impacted the world. That's the difference that you can make, being a mentor of one person, and strategically of what they can accomplish as one person later in life, you see. So they can create decimation and hurt for the community if we leave them just as they are, or we can just try to mentor that one. So sometimes I look at charities and they put focuses on big numbers. I'm not a big number person. I just make that difference in the life of one, and you never know what you will accomplish, right? I still ended up homeless on the street at the age of 19. After I left home, I just had to get away. Sometimes you have to change an environment, right? Let's face it. Sometimes we do have to try to work on the environment. I had to leave the environment in BC where I was growing up, because as much as I had those positive influences, it was still an overwhelming thing, and I had to kind of restart. I did move to Toronto to hopefully try to change it. You know what? Initially, I did funnel around for a bit, but then it kind of worked out. Now, just to give you an indication of what my mom looked like, that was my mom in just about 1955, 56, right before she came to Canada to teach at the age of 19. And you can see that. And then that is my story is a national story. It's been featured right across from Vancouver to Halifax and back again. From Burnaby Streets, like the social worker, front page, Vancouver Sun from 2009, right before I helped launch the drug prevention strategy for the Winter Olympics. And that was Fred Lepkin, who was my school teacher, who they did that shoot when we did this in 2009, and he was the teacher who made that difference in my life in grade 11, and basically said, "You're just a jerk. You need to now learn how to speak." From 87 to 95, I struggled. After I moved to Toronto, I had a young family. I began to create a similar scenario to maybe what I grew up with, but I said no. I had to break that cycle, right? Those seeds of mentorship that were planted by Brian Turco, the youth worker, and by Fred Lepkin, the school teacher, did eventually come back. One thing that Fred did instill in me was the fact that education was my friend. It wasn't my enemy. I didn't have to let a bunch of people who labeled me retarded from grades 1 to grade 10 define my future. I could understand that knowledge would be power for me, and he helped me to readjust that. So I did end up going back to school, and it was funny because I had these kids. I would just take my kids into my lectures with me. I'd never forget my daughter, my firstborn. I took her into my class, the sociology of sex, at the University of Toronto. And she went to her kindergarten class the next day and told the class what she learned in her father's university course. But those are the sacrifices you have to make at times. Just in terms of some of my work with Aboriginal communities, because again, it is that thing that my mom instilled in me. I should let you know that when I was involved in street gang activities in British Columbia, we did have Aboriginal young people in our gang, right? I understood it, the alienation, the anger, the frustration of young male Aboriginals who were my friends. And if anything, people would say they're just bad kids and they're horrible, but you know, it was amazing how much pain we had, the anger we had, right? The breach of society that we had, right? I was part Aboriginal, you know, and they were Aboriginal, and you know, and I remember we'd play hockey and the racism that we encountered on the ice, right? And so it was very real. So I really always had this passion to want to give back to Aboriginal communities in Canada because of that. So I ended up becoming, when I became a professor, I did get seconded into the First Nations Technical Institute. Has anybody heard of that? The First Nations? Yeah. So one of the things that I did is I taught research methods to, you know, First Nations folk, including elders and so forth. And it was really, really cool because, you know, one of the things that, I had an elder come up to me one day and she said, "Professor," because that's, you know, that's what an elder does, "Professor." And she was an older lady, and she said, "You know, do I need research to put my hand in Lake Ontario and determine that it's polluted?" And so I thought, yes, that's awesome. So anyway, so I learned a lot from the elders. There were some amazing things. I wish I had more time to share with you some of the things that I received back from the elders as I was their professor in teaching them research methods. It was absolutely phenomenal. But you know, I learned as much from my First Nations classes as I did teach them to help them get their bachelors of social work. Most of them had college diplomas, and so we were just trying to get them their university degrees. And they went from age, you know, like 20 to like 80. You know, so it was a very eclectic, widespread group. As I mentioned, I was mentored by Charlie Coffey. He instilled in me the need for financial literacy and financial empowerment to be to basically be a foundation for our First Nations communities. Now, we know that there's a lot of other issues there. We've seen some of, you know, where there's going to be corruption in any community nowadays, right? But that's more of a legacy of colonization than it was of what the actual natural state is. Can we ever get back to that first natural state, for lack of a better term? Who really knows? But I believe it is in the spirit of First Nations people, and I think that it's something to be aspired to in a process of hope, for lack of a better term, right? One of my passions is professional wrestling. I know you find that hard to believe. But I do work, I sponsor professional wrestling. I work with some very, very famous wrestlers. And we actually took some big name wrestlers up to Iqaluit, Nunavut. And in 2 days, I think we raised probably about $60,000 for youth programs up in Iqaluit. So I know what it is to go to remote areas, see what's going on there, and actually try to make a difference and work with the people there and to have them. And as a matter of fact, they loved us so much, we went back after several other times and continued to do much more of the same. So if any of you need support raising money in your communities, just contact our wrestling people, and I'm sure they'd love to help. And then again, you know, I am a national gang expert. I am a Superior Court of Justice qualified gang expert. I'm one of the only ones in this country who's not a police officer who's qualified at the Superior Court. That means a judge has adjudicated me to be a gang expert. And I'm national. I'm on every major network dealing with gang issues in this country. And I've worked with First Nations projects in northern Quebec, Cree Nations, as well as in Hobbema after the shooting of Asia Saddleback and so forth. You know, I know the Indian posse pretty much fares it pretty much inside and out. So there's a lot of, so I work in terms of gang prevention and so forth, and trying to work with Aboriginal communities to address those issues. So what do we mean by health? Health is a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. I want you to chew on that for a second, because that is a commentary by the World Health Organization. And so it's important for us to get this really, really holistic view of what we mean by health, right? It's not just about hospitals and doctors. The social determinants of health framework is 12 key determinants. We might touch on those very briefly. Health Canada puts those out. What I did in my research back in 2005, I wrote a determinants of health framework for Canadian youth 29 and under with one of my colleagues at another university. And we basically said, okay, as much as there's 12 determinants, what we identified in our research is that the 3 key determinants form what's called social economic status: income, employment, and education. And so if we can make those things accessible to people, what we find is that everything else can follow, right? If you have income, then you can actually afford other things in life, right? If you're educated, the number one predictor of things that are going to be achievable in society, education leads to a job, which can lead to higher income. That's the best predictor. It's not about winning a lottery. It's not about working really, really hard to become a professional athlete or something that, like some of the motivational speakers who I'm on these circuits, they talk about, they go, yeah, rah, 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 you can all do it. The reality is most people can't do it to that same degree. Like most people aren't going to make it to the NBA. Most people aren't going to become a rap star. Right? So, but most people can become a school teacher. Most people can become a lawyer. Most people can become, a financial consultant, right? And so we have to be realistic with young people. And yeah, we could put these, Adam Beaches up on TV and so forth, right? But the reality is a lot of people, aren't going to necessarily make it. I remember Adam was once talking to a kid, and Adam, sat there and he went and he spoke to a young boy in one of the First Nations communities that he was there trying to inspire, and he's basically giving them the run. You can all realize your dreams. And this 10-year-old kid comes up to Adam and he said, "Mr. Beach, all my dreams are nightmares." Right? So we can sit there and go rah rah rah. So what I say to people is, we have to have an achievable. Has anybody heard of SMART objectives? They have to be specific, measurable, achievable, just realistic, and time realistic, right? And so that's one of the things that I basically promote with young people as I talk about. And I said the 7 dimensions that I filtered them down to, and then it's really about understanding these things and living these things and making them foundational in our life, right? This is just a model of kind of how I conceive health, right? Beyond just medicine and so forth. People are in the middle of a very complex society. And to try to remove people from that complex society doesn't make sense. And there's these elements of what we actually live in. And if you will, politics, economics, geography, of course, society, the culture, right? Spirituality, the values. And these are all, and it's not just about, like we talk about politics, the big issue. What's the big issue? Is it healthcare? Is it jobs? Is it education? Is it gas plant scandals, right? The reality is it's everything. And we try to act like we live in silos. And when we live in silos, we fragment people, right? And so we have to say, we have to always be aware of the holistic whole. Now, we know we can only work at certain things at different times, but we have to be aware of what the actual realities are. We live in a complex world. When we look at this issue of health, again, it's just the tip of the iceberg, and this is what this model shows. And you can see all of the other determinants of health that Health Canada has defined in terms of, what we're looking at. Transportation, some of you, I've heard, maybe have come down, here to Niagara. It costs like what? Like a month's pay just to get here. Is that correct? Sometimes like $2,000, right? Something like that. Just to come down, right? That's a month's pay for some people, right? Sometimes that's a year's pay in some other countries, right? So, just to get from Ontario to Ontario, it's crazy, right? And so, so transportation barriers and so forth. So these are some of the things. Now these slides, again, you have copies, so I won't go in depth. If you do want me to elaborate anywhere, feel free to kind of maybe at the end ask me some questions, and I'll be more than happy to do that. Now, one of the things that I do is I do use Aboriginal elements or try to reflect on those in my work, because, for example, the medicine wheel, I think, is one of the most efficient models that we have in our society. It explains everything. I'm going home now. But one of the elements that I do want to highlight from it is the aspects of life. The spiritual dimension, the emotional dimension, the intellectual dimension, and the physical dimension. And it's funny that the medicine wheel, the Aboriginal, speaks of these things, right, or refers to these things, because even in terms of my own clinical practice, right, as a psychosocial clinician, I'm a registered social worker, but I'm a psychosocial clinician. It's just a bit higher up. It's just higher than a social worker, lower than a psychologist. But I focus on psychosocial diagnosis, assessment, treatment, and evaluation of people, right? And what I do is I treat the affective and the behavioral and the cognitive components of people, right? Amongst other things, I'm just consulting clinical director of Children's Aid, the second biggest children's aid in the country. I'm a consulting clinical director, 80 cases a year, for example. And I have to deal with these elements of the people that I treat. I also have clinical practices in Burlington and in Newmarket, where I treat a plethora of people, in addition to having overseen at this point in my career close to probably over 5,000 clinicians in the province of Ontario, right? In terms of teaching them and or supervising. And so, affective, the emotional, why do people feel the way they do? I'm an expert in that. Just ask me how you're feeling. Why do people do the things they do? Their behavior. I'm an expert in that. I can tell you right away. I can read any person, I guarantee you, with probably about 90% accuracy. I'm not saying that to say I've learned about people. Why? How have I done that? Because I spend time with people. Because I'm a people. And when you work with people, you just get to. And how do I do that? How do I know 90% of what people are? Can I tell you? Because I listen to them. Because I don't need to interpret it. If you tell me I'm feeling miserable, with 90% accuracy, I can look back to you and go, "You're feeling miserable." It's funny. When I was being qualified, I was the first judge who qualified me was Gethin Edwards in Brantford Court, and I remember because he gets all these experts, all these doctors, and all these psychiatrists and psychologists, and they're Form 53 experts, just the same as I am, and they know everything. You know why they know everything? Because they studied it. And so he said, "Dr. Hutchinson, what makes you an expert?" And I sat on the stand, and I looked at Justice Edwards, and I said, "Because I have 2 ears and 1 mouth, I listen twice as much as I speak." And he goes, "Dr. Hutchinson is indeed an expert. We will proceed." What do you do in court? Make the judge feel he's the funniest guy and knows everything. That's what you do. That's how you win your cases. And again, most definitely a spiritual element to my practice, okay? That's something else. I really believe that we need to focus on the spirit of people, the passion in who they are. That's the way. My modality of practice is positive identity formulation within a positive identity formulation within a solution-focused, person-centered approach. I start with the person, I try to get the people to come up with their own solutions, and I try to solidify their identity. And I believe that's what people in our society need. I know, and that's my approach to practice, $300 an hour, thank you very much. Okay, now, go to tier healthcare. Covered by most insurance plans. That's the benefits part, by the way. Make sure I'm included in your insurance. So what are these key factors in determining health? There's a quote here: "I want to live without stress and worries. I don't need to be rich and famous. I just want to be happy." What is it like? What do people come and see me for and pay me a lot of money in terms of my clinical practice to do? Those people who are in my private practice. Well, they just actually want. Most people just want to be happy. If we really get down to it, right? Want a stress-free life and just want to be happy, right? So, what is the greatest single factor to health? Is it smoking? Is it alcohol? These are big problems, right, in communities, right? Drugs, we know that's bad. Is it violence, gangs? It's always in the street. The conservative government would like to believe, our federal government, there's a criminal behind every tree. Right? What about poverty? We know that poverty, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, poverty and malnutrition is a global, huge threat to health. And I'm not diminishing that. But again, when we're talking about in a North American kind of context, Canadian context, ultimately what it is, those are the big factors. But what happens at the individual level? What drives people to smoke? What drives people to drink? What drives people to do drugs? Why do people become violent? What is the overall impact of poverty? Stress. I'm a little stressed right now. Just turn around and leave quietly and no one will get hurt. And again, as we talk about stress, we're talking, some of you, do you all know that there's good stress and bad stress? Right? Eustress is the good stress. That's the stress that, it took us to get up out of bed this morning and get down here. Otherwise, you'd still be in bed. But distress, that's what we talk. That's the stress that we normally talk about. Distress, bad stress, distress, and so we just simplify it as stress. And it's interesting. Stress is simply a response. Okay, it's really just how we respond to things. And guess what we do? 95% of people probably in our world, in our society, don't respond to change very well. They don't respond to situations or contexts very well. We don't respond to pressure. Does anybody here get mad? We go, just chill. I'm not happy with it. Like, we should all be like Tim Hudak. I was watching him last night. I lost. I'm going to resign. 8 years earlier than I thought I was going to. Kathleen Wynne. Smile and wave. You know, yeah, exactly. But the reality is, you know, practice makes better management. And that's why we talk about this term stress management, right? And it is, so the whole thing about this is it is possible. I've had a miserable life. I can't tell you what I've gone through. I mean, I did sort of tell you a little bit. But, you know, and that's one of the reasons I share it. Because some people will say, you know, he's up there, oh, he's really good. He makes a lot of money. He's, like, you know, got all these companies. He's doing really, really good for himself. You know what? No, life does suck, but it's what you make of it. And we got to teach our young people that. You know, it's not about instant coffee and fast food, right? It is like, and you know, it's funny, I meant to say this earlier. When I'm on the speaking circuit with these celebrities and stuff, and they're going, rah, 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 you can do it, rah, rah, rah. And I'm like going, man, you look like an idiot. And I, you know, and I walk into 800 kids in a high school, and I look at them and I go, I didn't want to get up this morning, and I was like really depressed. And, but I'm happy that I'm here with you. But one of the things I want to do is I want to let them know life is a grind. It is hard work, right? Preparing for this presentation for me was hard work. You know, the hours that kind of went into do these slides and so forth. And you know, my research assistant Michael Park, who's here, you know, he helped me with some of the foundational, just to put some of the ideas out on the slides initially. Right? Because I just need, because I'm so busy, and I have to say, I said to him, just put this on there, put this on there, and do this, and I don't know how he did it. He just kind of listened to me and just wrote, because he's really good at note taking. Right? And so he then just threw some ideas on the slides, and then I had to refine it, of course. But it was a lot of work, and so it isn't. Nothing comes easy in this world. But yet we live in this entitled kind of world where our young people think that, you know, they're owed something, and you know, and take into account we were all young once too. And we might have actually felt that way too. You might not have, but I'm sure a lot of us did. And so, you know, they're just actually feeling the same way that maybe we did when we were their age. And so the reality is that, you know, we have to be real with you know, our children and our families, and understand that, you know, there is hard work, and to embrace them and embrace what their passions are and find them and teach them how to find that. Now, so it's not all about, you know, yeah, you can do it and become, you know, this NBA player or rap star, like, you know, we said, no, we don't. If that's what they're going to become, by all means, we need to reinforce it, right? Okay. But we should also back it up, right? The reality is, you know, I'm a professional musician. I've been a professional musician for a long, long time, and I got to play around some other very professional musicians, right in their shadow. But you know what? I got this close to Bryan Adams, but I'm not Bryan Adams. You know, and you know, I've been this close to, you know, the guy who founded Guess Who, right? But again, I'm not him, right? So the chances of actually becoming that is, you know, but we can become this, you know, a university professor or a lawyer or a financial expert, and so we have to really reinforce these things so that people aren't stressed by trying to actualize things that they can't, like that they might not be able to just get to that level. Some of the psychosocial issues of stress, in fact, impact the body, the mind, the emotions, the behavior, right? These are the psychosocial areas. These are what I treat in my clinical practice. But again, I'm not a medical doctor. I don't prescribe medicine, but I work alongside psychiatrists and medical doctors. And we know that stress basically contributes to some of the biggest risk factors that impact people in terms of their day-to-day performance. Just the common cold, right? Stress is what kills our immune system. One of the greatest predictors of cancer, depression, stomach ulcers, heart disease, right? Any of the people know anybody who have any of these things? Can you tell me? I guarantee you. Would anybody say that, you know, You can't basically, there's a 100% correlation between stress before they got these things. Okay? So it just goes, so we often don't talk about this, but but what causes this is the pressures of our society. The pressure to try to have a decent house. I'm not talking about a house. I'm talking about a decent house. Right? Just to have a normal house is very expensive. Right? You want to live in the city of Toronto? Does anybody know what the average price for a house in the city of Toronto is right now, roughly? Yep.
Probably about $500,000.
Yeah, around 400,000 minimum, just for a house. 400 grand. You know what? Does anybody know what the average salary for a woman in the province of Ontario is, or in Canada for that matter, is? 35,000. 35,000. That's not even 10% of the price of a house. Like, what do you need for what's a conventional mortgage on a $400,000 house? 100 grand. How do you save 100 grand on a $35,000 income? $45,000 is the average salary for a man in this country. Okay. Now, lone parent. Does anybody know what family poverty line is in Canada? About $40,000. Roughly about 40 grand. Right? That's poverty. The family poverty line. The individual poverty line is about $22,000. So, like, when we're looking at the average salary, it's not, first of all, it's not that much over. The average salary is not that much over poverty lines, right? And so even trying to get into just a regular house, for lack of a better word. By the way, those $400,000 houses in Toronto, aren't that great, okay, necessarily. I'm not going to go through the denseness of these slides. They're there for you to review and read. If any of you want detailed, substantive kind of content in terms of where my presentation is, or some of the elements of it. But again, we got about 3.2 million Canadians. That's about 12% of our population who have long-term physical, psychological, chronic conditions that affect their functioning because of stress. Okay. Now, that's probably underestimated because that's only what's reported. We all know that a lot of men don't go to the doctor. Right? So we know that that's underreported, and we know that that's probably disproportionately representing females in there, although they would like to say that they try to control for that. But again, stress leads to high rates of unemployment. Again, work is identified. As stress factors rise, what else rises? Obesity, cardiac arrest, and so forth. But the issue, one of the biggest issues is it's not just about the fact that people don't have enough money. It's what the biggest predictor of a sick society is actually income inequality. The divide between, let's say, the rich and the poor, the wider that is, the more unhealthy a given society is. This is what all of the world evidence shows. And it's basically this gap, and I believe it's a spiritual sickness. It's my Aboriginal stuff coming in. It's a spiritual sickness. It's we are not caring for our brothers and our sisters. That's what it's about. It's just about we as a society are not truly caring and being compassionate for our brothers and sisters. And that, no wonder everybody has anxiety. Because if you're living in a society where you know what the spiritual truth is, the spiritual truth is we ought to, as human beings, be caring and compassionate towards our brothers and sisters. We all know this. And if we're not seeing it, how do we function? We have to still get by and function in our society. But we know this truth, and anxiety defined is knowing a truth and being uncomfortable with the fact that it's not being fulfilled, but it's at a subconscious level. Okay. That's why a lot of people, when you ask people, what's creating your anxiety? People don't know, because a lot of anxiety is something that's precipitated subconsciously, right? And but it's not subconscious in a Freudian sense. We actually kind of want to know it is, but we've kind of just lost it because it's not something that we've made transparent. It's part of the iceberg that's below the water. Okay. Again, one of the things that we focus on are wants in our society. I'll get to this later, but instead of the needs. And when we live in a society that says, here's what you should have, here's the marketing society, the wants, and it's transcending the needs, this creates an artificial divide. We're not good enough. We don't have that. That creates stress. That creates a disconnect for people. Right? So that's something to kind of think about. We'll get into that. So that leads to this notion of financial stress. I never have enough money. I don't have enough money to get the things I want. I don't have enough money to get the things I desire. We're not talking about necessarily the things we need. We're not, we're not talking about, like, people say to me, I used to be in finances for 7 years. I worked for a chartered bank in Canada as I started out in customer service and worked my way up. And I became an account manager. And I was a lender and an investment expert. I did my some of the securities courses and I got licensed. And I had some of the richest people in this country were my clients. I worked in the Bridle Path area in downtown Toronto. I treated my clients were the who's who ran this society as a banker, a young banker. And I remember they would come into. I remember this one lady. She would just come in every day, and she would just update her bank book just to see how many millions she had. And she'd go, and I'd be like, oh, poor thing. But I remember one person, they came up to me and they said, Anthony, you deal with all these investment products. What is the best investment product? What's the best way of investing? And I looked and I said, contentment. Contentment is the best, because it's not what you make, it's what you keep, if you will, right? If you just spend it all, but if you invest it and you put it into a house and you put it into a good pension plan and it's how you manage your money. It's becoming financially literate, which will be the best strategy, right? And so, but a lot of people, they don't even know that. The two things they don't teach you in school are what? How to balance your checkbook and how to have a good relationship. Right? Anybody do that in course in high school? Balancing your checkbook and having good relationships? Trust me, what do I say in the public media? Anybody know what I say in the public media? Like, if you've ever seen me, I'm right across there. Multiculturalism sucks. It divides people. It doesn't unite people. Right? Multiculturalism divides people. It doesn't unite people. What else do I say? Don't trust bureaucrats. Don't trust the government. I was quoted in a newspaper saying once, don't trust the government. And I remember as a CEO at the time, and my board of directors went, I can't believe he said, don't trust the government. And most people, make him step down. He said, don't trust the government. And I looked at them and I said, would you trust the government with your children? To baby them? And then people were like, oh, would anybody here? Does anybody here want Kathleen Wynne to babysit your child? Step up, come on, if you want her. Tim Hood. How about Tim Hudak? I remember after I saw the debate, I said, that was just creepy. On my Twitter. Canada. I didn't put this on my slide. I was going to say Canada sucks. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a proud Canadian, as you can attest from my Montreal Canadiens jersey. I am a proud Canadian. I love my hockey. But as a nation, we should be ashamed. What, we're the best country in the world and we're 25th out of all development countries in terms of child poverty and 10th with in terms of the national income per person? That means that there's like 24 countries that are better than us. And there's basically 9 other countries that have better incomes, right? So we're not the best. In terms of what we'd like to believe, right? We have a long way to go. Now, we are better than the United States, but we still have a long way to go, right? So what are the key sources of stress? Now, within the social determinants of health framework, we would look at some of the key determinant areas. You could look at culture, things like racism and exclusion. That's how you could connect it. Social networks and family problems. Usually we're going to look at challenges in communication between people. Individual priorities. Like some people put, their personal needs in a family ahead of the family need. We're a family who's suffering. The husband says, I'm going to buy a boat. Food or a boat? Boat, food. Okay. Individual, anybody do that? Any of you ever had a guy in your life who, bought you golf clubs for Christmas? Those guys are awesome. I know this. There's a woman I saw, and she said, my husband for Christmas wrapped up a pair of my own boots and gave them back to me. Wow. He took over my mantle of jerk. Individual understanding and perception. It's funny. It's when we talk about issues in terms of how we connect with people. Sometimes it's, are you understanding? Like, have you ever had a significant other where they didn't understand you? And you know what? I know most of you in this room are females. I will tell you, you are always right. If you're a woman, you're right. The reality is this: your perception is reality, and men need to understand that. If you're, in those kinds of relationships, if you're in, straight relationships, it's fundamental truth. Perception is reality. My business coach, who's like 70 years old, he's a Hungarian guy. He coaches CEOs right across North America. This guy is probably the best executive business coach probably in North America. He does the people who run our society. Just to give you an idea of who he was, he basically is the one who told Jack Layton that you should become the federal leader for the NDP, right? Jack was in his office. And so Michael was my business coach. Now he's a close confidant and friend of mine. We were working on a book together. And I, in terms of relationship success, now of course I wish I had this from before for my 2 ex-wives. But the reality is that he's now, he's trying to mentor me because he wants me eventually to have a healthy, functional relationship. Myself, right? So he said to me, Anthony, I'm going to tell you, when you're ready for that third go-around, what you need to understand is you can finally learn whether or not you want to be right or be happy. So there you go. Jordan, just so you know, be right or be happy, right? Again, barriers in educational literacy causes stress. Issues with employment, working conditions. What's the number one thing? At the end of the day, what we're really talking about is people's safety, right? If people are feeling unappreciated or they're feeling vulnerable, we're always trying to get. It's really about the safety that people feel, employees. It's really safety that we all want. Every one of us just wants to be safe. That's a very important word for us to understand. It doesn't matter about the relationship. We're talking about safety all the time. Can everybody resonate with that? It's really about just feeling safe. That's what we're always talking about when it comes to being people, right? That ability to minimize pain, if you will, right? Just people want to feel safe. Again, food. We are what we eat. That's a reality. That's a reality. We are what we eat. Housing challenges, again, income. And then again, some people just have a lack of hope, lack of passion in their life, lack of exercise. Some of the key sources of stress: money, work, economy, relationships, family responsibilities. This is a kind of a neat little thing. It said here, effort versus imbalance, homework imbalances, role ambiguity, change in roles, a new parent. You become a new parent. It's really, really great. The husband loves the wife. But for example, when they're married, then she gets pregnant and there's a baby and then he turns into something else. And then it's all on her, I don't want to stereotype, but it's like that quite often, right? What are the top causes of workplace stress? Is it too much work? Actually, guess what? A lot of people, like work. A lot of people like to be busy and do work. It's not, you know what it is? It's not being appreciated. Have any of you been appreciated enough in your workplace? Put up your hand if you are appreciated to the degree that you deserve. Just 1, 2. No, by the way, all of the WP employees, please put your hands up. Your bosses are standing right behind you. Okay? Other than WP. Now, do you ever watch those surveys, the best places in Canada to work? You see those, like the top, Bank of Nova Scotia is one of the best places to work in Canada, the best employers. Yeah, right, a bank. It's kind of like saying a law firm is. Is work-life balance a dream, though? We threw all these terms around. Work-life balance, what is that? Is that a dream? Check it out. At work, she's thinking about sleeping. At home, she's dreaming about work. Who invented work-life balance? The people who have a bad day go home and kick the dog. You've heard about that, right? We can get into some of this after. The reality is, you know what a woman does when she's really stressed out at work? She goes home and ignores the kids because she just needs to shut everything out. Right? You ever see that? As a woman, you just need time. And then, of course, what does the husband do? Hey, honey, is dinner ready? Hey, mommy, I need this. Hey, neighbor, I need to steal your pot. Now, I mean, cooking pot, not and so the reality is, but a husband, when a husband is stressed out at work, what does he do? He goes home and takes it out on the family. By the way, these are what the research shows, right? A woman tends to shut out, and the man generally externalizes. That's what the research shows. Right? So how do we, in all of this stress, all of this misery, remember I told you, I'm going to now have to move to some solutions. We've got half an hour to do solutions. Healthy parents, healthy communication. If I had to pick one thing about creating healthy parents, it's really about communication. Okay? It's really, because if you think about that, everything leads to stress. Role conflict. You know, I can't tell you, as in therapy, when I have a woman who just became a mom, or she's had a few kids, and she's coming to me, and she says, you know, my husband is still doing all the things he did, but my body had to give birth for his child, and he's going fishing. Right? And so the reality is, yes, sir?
No, because it's a great message. Can we take a short break and then bring everyone back for another, because we have time.
Oh yeah, okay, okay, good, okay. So let me just get through just maybe the healthy parents, okay, okay. And so as the roles change for people, it causes them stress. You see what I'm saying? And so being able to communicate that for what a woman needs. Tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, I am a woman after all, but I believe you need to be understood and heard. Does anybody know what I mean by understood and heard? I mean heard and understood. And men need to understand that. And if a woman's saying, I need help, I need support, I need some help and understanding, and I need a break, they need help and support and understanding and a break, correct? And so that's the role conflict model. The role has changed. The role changes for a mother probably more than a father, because it's just a different element. Because guess what? She was working too. And if a woman says, I'm working, and maybe she's making 40,000 and he's making 60,000, but guess what? Work is work. One's not more important than the other because somebody makes 20,000 more than the other. See?
And her work doesn't stop.
And her work doesn't stop. The double day, right? It's and you've all seen those studies. What we should be paying women in our society, a housewife in society, like to raise children, is like what, $250,000, right? Because she's a nurse, she's a teacher, she's a chauffeur, she's a counselor, blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
All the occupations. The restriction model, if you have kids, the sexual dissatisfaction model. You know, it's funny. You know they say how a woman falls in love is through her ears. Right through her, not nibbling on the ear, but I mean, and men the men just come home and like they're there, and they're like I'm here, honey, and she's like, yeah, you are. But the reality is, I'll tell you, we're going to take a break here for a minute, but the reality is that when we talk about this, sexual dissatisfaction model, it's funny, I meet people, they're professionals, man and woman, they're in that type of relationship, and he's complaining that he's not getting enough sex from his wife. And she's like, I just want him to talk to me. Okay. And I looked at him and I go, sir, is she being unreasonable? Can you tell her you love her and that she's beautiful? And he's like, oh. I did. I did. Yeah. Honey, you're beautiful. Let's have sex. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And these are the people keeping us safe, enforcing our laws. Thank you very much. Yes. The financial cost, what does it actually cost? By the way, we want to get realistic. Do you know what costs about $150,000 a year to take care of a child in our society? Think about that. The health care, the education, the roads that they travel on, the police to keep our children safe. Think about it. Like all of the elements, if we proportionally divide it up, There's a lot of elements that go, you've heard it takes a village to raise a child, right? And so it does cost a lot to raise children. So just because, we have to, and the reality is some children are in better areas for a lot of that stuff to happen. Some children don't have barriers to roads. And some children don't have access to good education and so forth, right? So in terms of traditional relationships, the husband participation, is essential where appropriate, or just a positive partner or a supportive network. It's right. These things can be interchangeable. Okay. Marital satisfaction is lowest when children, of course, are teenagers. We'll get to that. We need to decrease the stress cycle. Stress leads attention to family challenges back to more stress. It's a vicious cycle. Okay. Has anybody seen the power and control wheel? Have you ever seen that? I'll leave it up. I just got 4 more slides, then we'll take a break. But again, this is in any bad relationship. This could be between a husband and wife. It could be between a parent and a child. It could be between friends. Did any of you have an exploitive friend ever? Or an exploitive person in your life? An exploitive boss? Right? Think about it, right? Using fear, abuse, making people feel stupid or alone, denying or blaming. Any of your business colleague who does that, blames you when things go wrong? Using the children, that's in one of those kinds of, being bossy, using money for abuse, force, threats. Communication is really the key, right? We can see that a lot of these things, if people are being, communicating properly. The vital components in communication is dialogue, which means hearing and listening, which basically means listening and hearing, okay? It's understanding, because guess what? That is really about what? Respect. It's about respect. If we want to respect each other, it's how we hear people. That's why people go, I respect my partner, I respect my boss. Well, the litmus test, if people aren't hearing you and listening to you, guess what? They're not respecting you. Make sense? Think about it. Why do people talk louder to people? Like, why do people yell? Because they're not being heard. How are you feeling if you're not being heard? Disrespected. Do any of you have kids who you have to repeat yourself a million times? Okay, none of you do. Okay. But if you did have kids who you had to keep repeating yourself, it's because they didn't listen to you the first time. That's disrespect. See it? Okay. Sending, receiving, hearing, affirmation. That's the pattern. That's what we need to be doing. We have to start with us, so we can model. We can model for our kids, we can model for each other, even if other people are being disrespectful. It's not what things are said, it's how they're said, sometimes. Think about that. Right? So, perception is reality, right? It's not what's meant, it's how it's interpreted. Right? So what you hear is the way it should be. And so it's really about taking time and living in that moment to communicate. Hear your partners, hear your children, hear your coworkers, hear your employees, hear your clients. Right? Listen to the needs. That's why WP is so successful, right? Because they hear you. I know, I see how Ilya engages with clients, right? Because I don't work with Jordy, I wish I would. I should probably come and hang out with you more, Jordy. But the reality is that, so I'm saying all these wonderful things about Ilya, but just because I don't get to spend time with Jordy. But what's the ultimate goal? The ultimate goal is we have to love Jordy more. We have to respect him, we have to trust him, and we need to make Jordy feel safe. So at the break, I want everybody to at least, before you go to the coffee, give Jordy a hug. Successful relationships, we need to mitigate stress through equality and equity. What does that look like? This is the equality wheel, right? Actions that make people feel safe, respect, trust, honesty, good parenting, sharing in work, sharing in money, fairness, right? Just some things. And you can read these slides later. Okay. Decreasing parent stress. How do we do that? Again, going back to a social determinants of health framework, culture. We need to reinforce culturally appropriate practice. I will tell you, we have more positive things to learn from First Nations communities across this country, regardless of what the First Nations community is. I know that First Nations communities are as diverse as the French and the English and the Chinese and the French. And the Spanish. They're as diverse, right? We talk about First Nations and Aboriginal people, but I've seen the diversity amongst First Nations communities. And the reality is, but you know what? I can tell you that in some of the practices that were there, those troops, they are a lot better than anything that we have to offer from a European North American model of individualistic greed and corruption and all that kind of stuff, right? Social networks, we need to work together, and extended families especially, right? You look at some Chinese populations, some Jewish populations, some of these where you see there's some rich, stereotypical rich people, you see the family members helping each other with financial empowerment. Instead of competing with each other, right? That kind of thing, right? How do we pool our resources instead of this me, myself, and I individualistic financial approach? How do we pool? That's what a pension plan is, isn't it? Pooling. Think about it. We do it with a pension plan. Why can't we do it as people? Positive communication. Don't badmouth people. Gossip just destroys relationships, right? I hear parents who badmouth their own kids. I hear husbands who badmouth their wives. I hear wives who badmouth their husbands, right? Why are they together? Right? Try to gain perspective. Empathy, this word of empathy, right? Try to walk in somebody else's shoes, right? Education literacy, we have to understand knowledge is power. Parents should become educated about certain things, especially health. Work-life balance, it's not again, is it achievable? What we have to understand is our legacy, who's going to be on their deathbed going, I made $1 million at the end of their lifetime, or basically on their deathbed saying, I had great kids. I had a really big house. My children love me. What's better? I think we focus on the wrong things in our society. It's really about what makes us feel safe, what makes us feel valued, what makes us feel nurtured. That's what's important. Okay? Food security, and by the way, I'm not being prescriptive, these are suggestions. Okay? You don't have to listen to me. Nutrition, you are what you eat. Housing, again, as I think about housing, sometimes I see my friends, so I got some friends, they have these mansions. My best friend has a mansion. He doesn't even live in it. It's like Young and 401, one of the primest real estate areas in Canada. This beautiful mansion, everything there, it's gorgeous. He doesn't even live in it. He's a multi-millionaire. He's worth $35 million. My best friend, And I sit there and I go, man, there's people on the street. Like, why can't? One of the things I always wished is if I had a big house, I would want to turn it into a drug treatment center, because that's my dream. My dream is to open up my own drug treatment center, because I know I would do it differently. I've seen alongside some of the biggest drug treatment programs in this country, and there's 3% success rate. My mentor was Gabor Mate, who I think is probably the foremost addictions expert in the history of this country. And you know what he said? There's no such thing as addiction, and he's right. Every psychiatrist can go to hell.
Along with their drugs.
Along with their drugs. They can take them there. There's no such thing as addiction. All there is disconnect and hurt. And the fact that people are self-medicating with alcohol or the drugs that they use to hurt, to basically just hide their hurt, and then their bodies become dependent on that. That's what it's about. You take away a person's identity, what do? They medicate. And so Gabor, he talks. So what we talk about, again, I don't know if any of you ever heard of Jean Vanier, who started the L'Arche Centers. Does anybody know what the philosophy of the L'Arche Centers for Disability is? Love, acceptance, inclusion. Reinstilling the values of what it means to be human. That's cure. That's not treatment, that's transformation. As a social worker, we basically say, we intervene in people's lives. I'm interested in transforming people's lives. Show me an addiction center that transforms anybody's life, and I'll give you $1 million. Because you know what? 3% success rate. Right? Has to 100%. By the way, for the $1 million, it has to be 100%. Income sharing goes a long way. It's funny. I think about there was a year 35% of my income went to charities. Not United Way, but directly to charities. I believe going directly to the source, not giving to marketing strategies of charities. And, we have to take, those of us who have a responsibility to give back, to those who don't, right? And then, of course, physical and spiritual, live in the moment. You know what? I always say, people who have anxiety about the future, they come to me with anxiety about the future, I'm like, you know what? You have anxiety about the future, then stop thinking about it. Just live in the moment. My anxiety's gone. Okay, take a break, we'll come back. I guess so everybody got their coffees, everybody jacked, caffeinated? It's important to be caffeinated. I'm gonna move on to, so I just gave a little bit of a synopsis, hopefully, of healthy parents and some tips there. So I'm really gonna be focusing on solutions, obviously, for the better part of the rest of the presentation. So that like I always say, if you come to me with a problem, bring at least 3 solutions. So the problem is stress, right? That threatens health, and the solutions are healthy parents, healthy kids, and healthy families, right? So those are 3 solutions. Makes sense. So we'll do that. I think this is a little loud. Okay, so we'll do that. There we go. Okay, everybody can hear me? So in terms of healthy kids, it's funny. I had this opportunity to write a Determinants of Health framework for our country, for young people 29 and under. I was an advisor to the Minister of Public Health at the time of the country, and we wrote this Determinants of Health framework. And it's funny. I get an opportunity to work with some really, really cool people in North America. Like, I'm talking the leaders, the people you pay big money to speak. Like, you hear them, you pay big money to hear these speakers. I get to be on the same speaking circuit with them. I get to meet them and have on-ones. Anybody know Barbara Coloroso? She's the national, on Oprah, right? I've been on the same program with her, right? And when you get to be on the same program with Barbara, you get to talk to her in the green room. And the stuff you hear in the green room is like, just really, really cool. I'm like you have great hair. It's stuff that's meaningful. And anyway, but having written the framework for young people, the area of expertise in terms of marginalization with how kids feel and what stresses them out is quite fascinating. A term came up, just as I was talking to a couple of ladies here. Is it Jennifer? Or sorry. Yeah, Jennifer. And who won the prize? Gabe, yeah, Jennifer and Gabe. And they talked about this intergenerational decimation. And I worked with Joe Springer, and he was working with populations of young black men in Toronto. And there's this big problem of fatherlessness, right, in Toronto with the black men. And if you take away the men of a society, you essentially, or like remove them by prison, by death, by addiction. Well, there's no addiction, but I mean by drug abuse and so forth, right? If you take them away in those ways, you're killing generations, right? Because it repeats itself, and then the young men are there, and the women are there, but as women, you can't have children on your own, right? Well, sort of. Test tube babies, beaker. I had a beaker and a test tube. They were my parents, but I mean, other than that, it's hard. And so, but you take away that, and what do you do, right? It's difficult, and so we're committing intergenerational genocide in our urban centers with young black men through homicide, because we know that what they do is they point their guns at each other who are in their own image, and they shoot and kill each other. Well, on reserves, we know that Aboriginal men commit suicide in disproportionate levels compared to the Canadian population. So Aboriginal men, in Aboriginal communities, suicide is a leading cause of death with young men. Am I correct? Right? A significant cause. And so it's cultural genocide. We're killing Aboriginal people through suicide and killing young black men through homicide, but it's really just genocide. Because when nothing is done about it, that is apathy. And that is genocide. Am I making sense here? And I think it's something that we need to grasp, and that's what we as a society, as the good Canada and good Canadian society, have to take ownership of. And it can't be lip service, and it's not about just giving a few dollars here and there. It's about a paradigm shift in empowering people, and through financial literacy. And we have to start with our kids. We have to start with our kids. Because the way we're going to break the cycle is for that generation coming up. If we don't start with the generation coming up, the cycle will continue on and on and on. And you know that most of you in here are women, but tell me if you're not overworked. Anybody here not overworked? Yeah, you're working, like, if you're working double shifts, I guarantee you every woman in this audience is working triple shifts, right? On the job, and then at home, and then in the community. On the job, at home, in the community. And it's a reality. And so it takes a village to raise a child, right? $150,000 minimum. It goes from there. What are some of the factors influencing kids' health? Again, 75% social determinants of health framework. I want you guys to be aware of that term. 80 to 90% of who a child becomes in their life is actually determined before the age of 6. You all know, that's like, this is scientific, right? Fraser Mustard, right? Their personality is formed, the early life experiences, like this, we know this. And then the rest of the stuff that shapes what they will, you can have a person, we know if they're going to be intelligent, if they're going to be kind, if they're going to be thoughtful, pretty much by the age of 6. But what's going to determine whether they become a rocket scientist or whether they become a teacher or whether they become a financial expert is going to be the educational opportunities given them and the social support networks and the environment in which they're raised. Do you get what I'm trying to say? You can have a really smart kid. You keep them in a bad environment where they're not stimulated. How do they actualize? How do they master themselves, right? 5th and 6th graders said the most important person in my life is parents. Parents matter. Caregivers matter. I want to be careful to use the word caregivers because, as we know, what? In my life growing up, it wasn't always about my parents. I thank God I had some other people just in the community who cared about me. And they were strangers, right? And I was raised by other people who just cared, especially like that youth worker. A youth worker can go a long way. Sorry, I was talking to a guy here from Chatham, right? Hey, hello, great. What's your first name again? Donovan. Yeah, Donovan. He's a fast runner, not Donovan Bailey, though. And so, but he's the other Donovan. He's the more important one. And there, and again, just talking to Donovan, right? I mean, it's so important that if you take the time to care about, those people in your community, that might be the caring that makes that difference, right? So you can have surrogates. Anything that makes good parents or good surrogates healthy and happier in the long run can make children happy, right? It's amazing how many young people I get to engage with. And I walk up to those young people, I'm in therapy with them, I do therapy, and I look at my clients in therapy, and they don't have to pay me for this, because I wait till my hour's over, so they're not paying me anymore, and I spend 5 more minutes with them. And I look at them and I go, I am proud of you. Their own parents don't say that to them. Their parents bring them to therapy for me and pay $300 an hour for me to treat their kid. And when I talk to the kid, the parent never tells the kid they're proud of them. Like, you have to pay some stranger $300 to tell your kid that, Children who feel unloved by their parents suffer emotional damage. That should seem pretty evident. When children feel valued inside the home, they're going to feel valued outside. If it doesn't matter if they're out there being bullied and what, because they can be assertive. They can stand up for themselves because they know who they are. You give somebody an identity, they can't take that from you. Do you know why I became successful in life? I'm 47. I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to be straight with you guys, okay? I have literally the greatest life on this planet. The stuff I get to do, the places I go, the things I experience, who I associate with. I'm an advisor to world leaders. Seriously. I've been an advisor to the head of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I was a special advisor. I've been an advisor to the Prime Minister. Like when I was in my 30s. I've been in very powerful, influential positions. And and this is from a former street kid. But you know why? It's not because I'm any better. It's because I got educated. And the one thing nobody can take away from me is my education. Once you get it, they can't take it away from you. See? Once they get it. So no matter what, I still got that. And somebody said, is it a soapbox? Well, you know what? Yeah, it is. But it's opened up a lot of doors for me. So I don't think I'm better than anybody because I have it, but I have it and I use it when I need to. And that's a message we've got to give to our kids about education, right? Because you know what? It can become part of that identity. Whether it be if a person knows who they are, whatever it is they need to use, if a person knows and you validate that, nobody can take it away from you. Right? If each one of you know who you are, nobody can take that away from you, regardless. If you want, like for me, it was maybe education. For other people, it could be something in their culture. For another person, it could be maybe talent or skill you have. It doesn't matter, as long as you can have that identity formulation within a solution-focused framework. Right? That's what I'm giving you all therapy right now. a child's security or insecurity is highly correlated with the connection or disconnection that they have with positive adult models in their life. It could be a teacher, it could be a parent, it could be, but it's a person's identity. It's because children are sponges. They take in information, right? They're always taking in information. They're always learning. Even teenagers who think they know everything are still taking in information, okay? So it's very important, and it's again, how do we balance this love with discipline and supervision? That is very important. Like, I know a mom. She's a very successful mom. She's like has her own company, a $1.4 million company, a woman leader, and she had a really, really bad childhood growing up with her parents. Now, she came from a pretty affluent family, pretty upper middle class. You'd think that they had no problems. They had a lot of problems, Rich people, rich people have as many problems as poor people, believe it or not. And people have problems. And the reality is that when she had her kids, she completely spoiled her kids. They got away with everything. Like, she just let them do whatever. And as a result, they grew up and they turned out okay. They got good jobs, but they don't respect her. Like, they don't respect her. So I'm like, were you successful? Because she went to the extreme. She didn't discipline them, and because she went so far. So yeah, it's a balance, right? We have to love and discipline. Discipline is love, and love is discipline. You see, this kind of thing. So it's about this balance, and it's important to understand that. Children are exposed to risk factors, as we talked about, and these things are very real. If you want, you can ask questions about that later, but I won't go in depth into that. Just because I want to cover the material. Affluent families in prestigious, high-paying occupations often fail to engage in family interaction. I have 3 kids. I'm actually the legal guardian of my son who has autism. My daughter is 26. My son is 23, and my other daughter's 21. Right? My first marriage was brutal. It was hard. We were poor. We lived in poverty. It was it was a bad cycle, and I had to change it. I had to get off drugs. I had to stop drinking. I had a faith experience that helped to transform my life. That's why I believe the spiritual component is so vitally important, to have a connection to hope, right? Passion of what it means to be human. I am very busy, but you know what? My kids call me all the time. I have a father-daughter date with my daughters, even to this day, to let them know how beautiful they are, how precious they are. So that, I'll tell you, my daughter Bethany, she's awesome, She's got like the guys in high school. I remember the guys in high school. Hey, you're looking really good. Bethany would be like, whatever. My daddy tells me I'm better than her. See, like that, Bethany. So we need that, because that's what especially as men, it's something that men can do with their daughters and that's what's missing is this positive affirmation, fathers to sons, fathers to daughters, especially where we have this cultural genocide going on with black families in urban centers, Aboriginal families in Aboriginal areas, and how do we fix that? So mentorship is important. So wherever there's, but we have to try to find that and solidify that. High socioeconomic status youth, richer youth, are more likely to engage in drugs and alcohol. Has anybody seen that commercial where it shows like the rich kid in the neighborhood right before the movie? When you go to see movies, you see commercials first. Have you seen that? And you got the rich kids smoking up. Well, I have news for you. Like a lot of cocaine is really expensive. Right? Crack is cheaper, right? But you have to use a lot more of it. But cocaine's expensive. A lot of drugs are expensive. So a lot of people to afford drugs have to have money for drugs, and kids in poverty don't have that money. You see what I'm saying? So this is not stereotypical. A lot of kids in poverty, if they can gain access, great, But really, a lot of rich kids. So again, these things, I don't want to stereotype and say it's just about poverty and poor people. Kids are kids, okay? And barriers are barriers. Adolescent parents whose parents focus on their accomplishments of their child. You got your A. Do you ever remember that? Did you ever see that commercial when you were growing up? Mom, I got an A. Did you do the dishes? Did you ever see that commercial? When you were growing up, none of you saw that one? Who was? Who was in that? Were you in that commercial? That's awesome. That's, yeah. Like, you know, I remember when my daughter, Christina, when she was 20, when, you know, she's 26 now, I remember when she was like 5, and she was swimming, and she got into the swimming pool, and she's shaking, Daddy, are you proud of me? And I'm like, yeah, you went to the swimming pool. But, you know, but like, yes, honey, you're so awesome, you're the best little tadpole ever. You know, give her a hug, you know. Like, it just, and you know what my daughter still says to me till this day? Everything. Daddy, are you proud of me? Like, she's in 26. My daughter is completing her university degree, right, on a 4-year degree on a 7-year plan. And you can relate to that. But you know, I am so proud of the fact that she's in school. It doesn't matter how long it takes, as long as they're there. You know, I got a mom who's bashing her son because, you know, he failed 2 courses for his grade 12. I'm like looking, and I basically go, but dude, you passed 4 out of 6, man. That's 60%. Even the liberals didn't get that, and they're leading the province. Think about that. 60% is bad. Dude, you're going to be the premier. Twice. You work at your 60% of your success rate. Seriously, right? I'm like, you know, like I was like a CD&E student. I'm a university professor now. You know, by the way, I got kicked out of UBC in the first go-round. I was banned from any university in the country for 2 years, from 85 to 87. Because I was so dismal as a professor. In 2006, I was identified as one of the top 3 professors in the province of Ontario out of 14,000 by the Ontario Confederation of University Faculty Associations. Take that, UBC! See? But it's about mentorship. It's about finding people who will care and believe in you. It's interesting how parents define the stress of their kids. This is a study, I think it's from the United States, how parents define the stress of their kids. My kids have too much homework, too much pressure at school, other kids, all the activities that, you know, we as parents are, you know, that's maybe we shouldn't put them as many. But if you notice, it kind of moves down, and where it's the parents are actually placing the blame on other things outside of the home. See that? The parents define the stress as anything other than themselves. It's interesting how children prioritize what stresses them out. Their parents having problems. Isn't that crazy? Like, see, if you talk to the kids, it's their parents who are stressing them out. Think about that. Like the parents don't want to take responsibility. Most young people who come to therapy with me, their parents end up firing me half the time. You know why? Because it's the parents' fault. The kids are screwed up. Well, it's not necessarily the parents' fault because they're bad parents. Maybe somebody didn't teach them. But you know, it's not a social work problem to fix a child. It's a family issue. And it's about communication and respect and understanding each other in the family setting. That's all. I'm not blaming the parents. I mean, I could sit there and blame my mom. My mom had depression. My mom was abused. She had the major depression. She was messed up. My mom was raped multiple times. She had a child from a rape that she had to give up, who was connected back to her 50 years later. You know, trust me. Like, I have to have some kind of empathy for my mom. I love my mom. You know how much I love my mom? This woman who beat me and did all kinds of horrible things. I lived in Toronto. She was in Vancouver when she was dying. And the last year before she died, I flew back and forth at least once every 3 weeks to go and lie on the hospital floor in her hospital room once every 3 weeks. Flying back. Anybody know what flying back east-west does to your body? It's brutal. Like, you know, it takes you time to recover, like weeks. And when I'm doing this, I was a CEO running a multi-million-dollar company at the time. So so I love my mom, and I had a good relationship with my mom, especially later in her life. But but again, it's hard, right? I understood that she had those barriers, but a lot of them were caused by being with these abusive, vicious men in her life, including my father, who himself had issues. Right? So I'm not trying to blame, but we have to take responsibility, and parents need to take that responsibility and say, you know what, if we're broken, we're broken. If the males in our communities are broken, they're broken. But they have to embrace it. And they have to be able to take that challenge and turn it into an opportunity. They have to take that weakness. If there's no weakness, we can't overcome anything. If there's no barrier, we can't triumph. If there's not a problem, we can't fix it. Do you get what I'm saying here? So I don't like to just say that, here's the problems. I always say in therapy, I'm not simply just a therapist. Therapists, what they do, clinicians and doctors and therapists identify problems and challenges, and they try to fix people. As a therapist, I'm a coach. You know what a coach does? A coach starts with the strengths and the abilities and the capacities of a person and the positives of a person and builds them. And if you focus on those positives, guess what? The negatives become smaller and smaller. It's been a proven success paradigm in my clinical practice. That's why I literally get people from all across different domains. I treat people who have, like I said, children's aid, from the poor to very wealthy people. I've had people, world leaders, not world leaders, but significant leaders who have become my clients, right, in some of my practice. And because you start with people where they're at, right? Again, fighting with friends, siblings, taking a test, wondering if somebody thinks you're attractive, self-esteem, that's self-esteem. Anybody with social anxiety? Anybody know what social anxiety? No? None of you? Ever heard of that? But social anxiety, what social anxiety is really confidence. It's self-esteem, it's performance. It's self-esteem, right? That's what, you fix a person's motivation and confidence, you fix social anxiety. Okay. Very controversial, but I do that, and guess what? It works. The number one cause of anxiety, there's something wrong with me. Anybody know that? The number one cause of anxiety is there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with me. That's why, at least, when you find out what's right with that person, they leave the office better. That's how I do my therapy. And I can assure you, it works. I'm not allowed, because as a clinician, I'm not allowed to have testimonials on my webpage of all my clients because it breaches confidentiality. But I can't tell you how many of my clients wish that they could do something like that. They've seen psychiatrists, they've seen psychologists. I run a psychology clinic. I got psychologists who work for me, right? And I can tell you that it's unfortunate that our psychology paradigm, our medical paradigm, our psychology paradigm are so antiquated, they're still stuck in Freud. If any of you saw A Dangerous Method, ever seen A Dangerous Method? It's all messed up. Right? It's as messed up today as it was back then. Right? Not having privacy and so forth. So change. How kids respond to change and circumstance. And these are the things that they identify. Really, it's just how they adapt to certain things. So we have to model that. So how do we decrease stress with children? Well, we have to understand the generational gaps. We know that addiction of video games has become the new addiction. Right? But we need to understand it rather than bash them over it. It's funny. Parents are complaining their kids are spending too much time on video games. Who bought them the video game? My kid won't get off their Xbox. Who bought it for them? I'm sitting here going, are you kidding me? I'm not going to fix your child. I need to fix you. If you want to fix your kid, take them on a trip. Take the money you'd spend on the video games and the video box and take them to Northern Ontario and volunteer in an Aboriginal nation to do some kind of youth program or something. You know what I'm trying to say? It just makes no sense. Social networks. I don't know if any of you, if you want to invest your time in a good book, Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Neufeld and Gabor Mate. Right? I mean, this is it's like $20. What a great book in terms of the fact that we've lost our kids to things outside of the family. Right? It's just a practical book, and it's quite frankly based on a lot of Aboriginal thought. Gabor is big into understanding Aboriginal communities and working with those paradigms. He was the doctor who treated downtown East Side people, for God's sakes, right? Probably one of the worst areas, concentrated areas in this country, right? That's where so many of the missing women went from, and he was one of the lead doctors there. Open communication with your kids. Again, no gossip. Don't gossip about your kids. Like parents who say, my kids really sucked in school. And they're your child. They're part of you. If you criticize your child, you're criticizing you. Think about it. The number one thing that moms want to hear from me in a therapy session is you're doing great. When I meet a mom and I actually talk to their kid, you know what I find out? The mom actually did a really good job. Because that's what the kid is saying. The kid is just also saying to me, I just wish my mom understood that. So she could back off me a little bit, because the minute you're questioning your kid, you're questioning your ability of how you performed as their parent. That's what you're questioning. If you did fine with your child, they are going to be okay in the long run. Because guess what? As much as my mom screwed up in certain elements with me, my mom taught me about charity. So I give because my mom was a giver. I love other people because my mom did love other people outside of the house, probably more than sometimes with us. But I learned how to do that. So I did take away a lot of what my mom did. And guess what? Even though I was busy and I did spend time, but my daughter, my younger daughter, Bethany's going to be 21, 22. She is studying to be a nurse. Christina is working with autistic kids. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Parenting stops at age 6. Just throwing that out there. I am an expert who's learned from Barbara Colaroso. Guidance is what occurs from 7 to 12. Mentorship, 13 to 39. If you're 40 years old still complaining about your parents, you need to get over it. Education, the best learning outcomes, I've got news for you, don't always occur in school. Kids who come out, I'm struggling in school, school sucks. Yeah, school does suck. I'm a university professor, and guess what? I teach my university students. You don't have to listen to everything I have to say. But I'll tell you, school does suck. Our school system is not meant for every kid. You know, not every kid learns in the same way. Okay? I'm an award-winning university professor. I needed to learn in a different way. Thank God for Fred Lepkin, because he was outside of the box. He was the only teacher. And you know what? That one teacher made up for the previous 10 years of education I got. Think about that. One teacher made up for the previous 10 years of education I got, or didn't get. Got it? Right? Think about that. That's the difference of that one teacher who had insight. Okay, so basically, we talk about this cats in the cradle, hunger, food insecurity, again, sharing houses, bringing kids into your family. Okay, so these are some of these other things that we can. Kids need to have fun, right? Kids need to have fun. Pathways to healthy families. What are some of the risks to families? There's no global consensus on what a family is. I want to be sure that you understand that. Family is just people. You know, we are a family. This is a family. We are family. You know, again, focus, work is a threat to family, right? This work-life balance thing. We bring home our work. It can negatively inflect on his family life. Family life conflict is a big issue. Here's the key thing I want to say. $2.7 billion in direct costs and $10 billion in direct costs are the financial losses of family problems in the workplace. Struggles in the workplace, right? Struggles in the workplace, right? Oh, sorry, family issues. Poor family issues lead to financial losses in the workplace. So it's important to keep families healthy. Charlie Coffey, as my mentor, when you know, he said to me, Anthony, as goes our communities, so goes our businesses. You know, we talk about fixing the economy and getting jobs. We need to fix families. Families need to be supported. You know, we know that if people have good, healthy family relationships, the productivity will transport into work. You can focus, you're not distracted, that kind of thing, right? We talked about workplace stress. So dysfunctional family issues can lead to serious implications for the workplace. It's important to keep workers healthy. It's important to keep workers healthy, especially their families. Benefits programs need to be, I can't tell you, I'm a registered social worker. I'm not a psychologist. Most of my clients who have seen psychologists, bad outcomes. They're coming, like, I can't tell you how many horror stories I get when people come and see me as a social worker. And the funny thing is that, you know, I can't tell you, as a social worker, I'm not covered, like, about sometimes 50 to 60% of the time for people's extended healthcare benefits. They need to simply see a psychologist or a psychiatrist. The two people who probably harm more people over the course, medically, over the course of our last 100 years. Okay? There's tons of evidence of this. Like, I'm not just talking out of my butt. Like, and you know, it's true, right? And so some people they've helped a lot of people. No, they haven't. Okay. They've harmed a lot, especially a lot of Aboriginal people. Oh, did I mention it was a PhD psychologist who labeled me mentally retarded in grade 1? Right? Yeah, he was pretty smart. Mothers are stressed by work. I talked about that earlier. Again, high levels of workplace stress, low levels of worker autonomy. We talked about that, right? So, in terms of this needs wants, this is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, Psychology 101. The basic needs are the important needs, and then you move up. But we got some family members who are off, they might off wanting to do their own higher level stuff, and they're neglecting the needs of their family. So it's important to understand that, one of the things I did, I had to make a sacrifice. I had to say, if I don't get educated to break the cycle of poverty, I'm not going to give my kids a future. So I had to go off and do 10 years of education and sacrifice. But you know what I did? Like I told you, I would actually take my kids to my university classes with me. Right? I took my kids to protests. I'll never forget. When I was at York University, I was on student government, I was one of the heads of the student union movement, right? Protesting the Mike Harris cuts and so forth. I had my kid with there protesting, standing up to a horse and a police officer on the horse. Yes, Christina, we're going to get run over. But it's okay. In the interest of education. Okay, Dad. Right? But again, engage, so we don't run off and do it without our kids, we do it with our kids, right? As an advocate, I don't advocate for Aboriginal people, I advocate with Aboriginal people when I work with them. Right? So it's about doing it together. We have to learn to place our own individual needs over wants. It's a collective, it's a sharing experience. It has to be together. That's why I love Jack Layton. We lost him. Too bad, right? But too early. But again, he truly talked about it. I loved watching Tim. It's about hope. It's about hope. You're not Obama, you're not Jack, okay, Tim? Just like yourself. But the reality is that it's true. Right? It is about hope, and it is about inclusion, and it is about caring and working together, and making our collective needs the priority. And if we sometimes have to sacrifice a little bit of what I want for the better good, then so be it. Because you know what? Everybody will end up being happy in the long run. Strive to balance the needs of a family based on a consensus as a whole versus the wants of the individual. Be cautious not to rush a process towards individual fulfillment. It's all about me, myself, and I. Me. We have to be about what can I do for you? How can I help you? But again, and then our kids, we have to teach that with them so that they're not becoming selfish and entitled. Communication is very key, obviously, and I talked about that a little bit and gave you some models about communication. It's interesting, 70% of divorces don't occur in high conflict marriages. People think that the predictor of a breakup is a high conflict marriage. It's an inability to communicate. You got two people who just don't talk, and they get divorced. Is that a surprise? So communication is vital, right? Communication is vital. It's not just about, and it's about quality communication. Forgiveness. Being able to forgive. I had to forgive my mom. I had to forgive my stepfather. He beat me every day. I would wake up 6 o'clock in the morning every day getting beaten. That's why I woke up every morning for 8 years, getting beaten. That's what my stepfather would come to my room, beat me. Oh, actually, he molested my sister first. He'd go and molest her for half an hour and then come and beat me. That's 8 years of our life, right? And you have to forgive, right? I talk about it and I don't feel the pain anymore. No, I don't feel the pain because I forgive it. I remember, right? So what that's it. I forgive, but I don't forget, right? So we have to learn to forgive. I need to feel safe in who I am. And by the way, he's 80 years old and he still has his issues. He's still angry. And he's 80. Right? So, how do we decrease family stress? Negotiation and fairness, non-threatening behavior, respect, trust and support, honesty, accountability, responsible parenting, shared responsibility, shared economic partnership. Okay. Now, just some concluding reflections. What are 12 healthy tips? Again, summary to achieve a healthy family. I want you guys to resonate with this Determinants of Health framework. I'd love to talk to you more about it. If you want more, I do workshops on that. I'd love to come and do those kind of workshops. If you ever need me to come and help out your communities, that's what I do. I try to make the social determinants of health accessible and comprehensible. In terms of healthy kids, it's really about modeling. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Healthy parents, it is about communication and solidifying positive communication patterns. I work with people to facilitate those types of processes because some people need to be shown. How do we do that? Healthy families, it's really about putting needs over wants, working together, sharing, that kind of thing, right? 12 tips. Financial budgeting, being able to talk about that. Financial literacy, living within needs. Good debt, bad debt. Some of you should hopefully understand what that is. Again, that's, but again, it's, you know, good debt is investing in things that lead to financial empowerment. A house, stocks, you know, but not, what's bad debt? Credit cards. 29% interest is bad debt. I know it's hard to fathom, 29%. Education in areas of passions. You know, I do jobs that I'm passionate about. I get to do so, like the cool things I get to do in this world. I never thought I would. You know, when I got out of a job and I got into a career, like I don't even have a career. I just do stuff. I just do stuff and people pay me. It's like so cool. Like, what do you do? I don't know. People just pay me. Let your behavior speak for itself. You know, your actions will demonstrate who you are, right? You know, your actions will demonstrate who you are. And so the proof is in the pudding, right? The proof is in the pudding. How do you know you have a healthy kid? Because the proof will be in the pudding. By the way, a lot of you have already done a great job with your kids. They're okay. Just let them breathe. That's what some of the kids say. Just let me breathe. And if they're going to screw up, they're going to screw up. But you know what? Kids are resilient. There's a Michael Unger is a good friend of mine. We do a lot of speaking together as well, and he wrote a book called why we bubble wrap our kids or something like this, right? And you know, it's the whole thing is that kids need to experience things. You did. Any of you ever fall on your head and land on your head when you were growing up? Now, of course, I'm the doctor who treats brain injury and concussion. Just come and see me too. But the reality is that as long if it doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger, right? Okay, communication. My doctor told me to avoid unnecessary stress, so I didn't open his bill. Okay, so don't come and see me. On managing stress, I mean, I like this one. Positive attitude, good support systems, exercise, laughing. I tried to make you laugh. That's one of the things I try to do. Take a dense amount of material and try to make it somewhat engaging. That's what I try to do. Taking time for you. If you don't take time for yourselves, you're no good to anybody else. So as soon as you finish this conference, you tell your boss at work, I'm taking another week off. And in your benefit programs, an extra week of vacation for yourselves and all the other employees. Okay?
Can you tell them?
Yes, I will. You tell them. You tell them. And by the way, I know a lot of good employment lawyers. If you guys ever need any support, just talk to me. I do med legal. I do IEs. And if any of you need assessment for your employers for vocational reasons, I do those. Right? Meditation, right? Just think of something positive, right? Think of something. Think of your faith. Think of whatever it works to positive. You can just think of a tree. Look at a tree. Look how beautiful it is. The Creator created a beautiful earth. You know, I'm just sitting there at my hotel, out of our hotel room today, coming to thank you WP for bringing us to Niagara Falls. It was just thank you. Just give them a hand because they did a really good job. What better atmosphere? I'm just lying in bed looking at Niagara Falls. I didn't want to come and present this morning. What are the keys to empowerment? Education, financial literacy, education, determinants of health, communication, it should be open, respectful, authentic, spiritual, believe it, have hope, compassion, sharing. Okay? Now, before I do my questions and answers, I just want to say this, just so you know I'm not faking this. You can all recite after me. I am woman, hear me roar. It number's too big to ignore. I've known too much to go back and pretend. I've been down there on the floor, and I am never going back again. I am strong, strong. I am invincible, invincible. I am woman. Thank you very much. Any questions and answers quickly? We've got about, what time is it now? We've got about 10 minutes, 5 minutes. Any questions? You're getting it for free, kind of, right now. It's going to cost a lot. Yes?
You mentioned smart objectives. I kind of missed that. You kind of went
Yeah, absolutely. The SMART objectives, they need to be specific, measurable, like you have to be able to assess that you're accomplishing them. They need to be achievable, okay? And they need to be realistic, and they should be time realistic as well, time sensitive. And that's just a way that people can be affirmed that they're able to execute things, right, in a proficient way, right? And some stuff that we can do for ourselves, with our kids, you know. Okay, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just in regards to dealing with the younger children, like mine's 11. So
Yeah.
How do you identify whether or not their stresses they're working internally, like if you get really worked up, so do you just let them work through it, or do you just try to coach them through it, or do you just tell them to relax and chill, or just use my husband's response?
Yeah, you don't give children commands like that, like relax and chill. I can't just take that one scenario without understanding the broader issues. Like, it's a lot more complicated. So, but again, it's about hearing the child. Now, sometimes what will happen is the children, by the time he's 11, he's already feeling unsafe in terms of communicating with the parents. Okay, because the reality is, because if he's already, that's been dead, so it needs to come from outside. It needs to be facilitated, and then the parents need to be willing to hear and respond to the child. Okay, so but the kids pick up on it, right? Remember I said up until 6 parenting stops, right? So you're talking in the guidance stage. So what you have to do with the child is that you probably have to they have to feel safe to just be able to be authentic, open, transparent in their terms of and heard. And you think they're 11, right? Like, they're not kids. They're like kids nowadays. One of the things I should say is I was in a gang from the time I was 10 years old. Like street gangs in Toronto, 8 years old. Okay, so like don't think that just kids are like these innocent little creatures. We can start pretty young to get. I was sleeping with a knife under my bed from the time I was 8, right? And I was getting into looking at my gang when I was 10. So kids they know where they're at, and they need and you need them to communicate with you with the trust network. And it's not about saying that yeah, we know we're the parent. I'm the parent, we're the parent, but we have to really. It's about how do we understand that child is a reflection of, like, they're part of us. And so what you're doing is you're actually when you're saying treating a kid in a certain way, it's generally speaking a reflection of the mother or the father, and or a combination of both. And that's what you're seeing. So the parents are fighting against themselves. Yeah.
I have 2 kids that are 20 and 17, and one is complete perfect child, the oldest.
Yeah.
And he goes to Miguel.
That means they're doing everything you want.
Well, yeah. The youngest is a typical, he's opposite of her. We'll be thrilled if she graduates high school.
Yeah, but again, school's not the be all and all.
We're so flabbergasted, and we're raised in the same environment.
Yeah.
That they're so opposite.
Yeah, but celebrate that. Like, because if they were both the same, you wouldn't need one. Right? So how can you have 2 children from the same parents in the same environment that hasn't changed, be so opposite? I know there's a lot of physical stuff in the brain of that, but I'm thinking the nurturing part is identical. Well, I guarantee you, I believe that the child who's different and eclectic is probably more like your wife than you. Would you say?
She looks like you more.
Okay. but my reality. Sometimes what will happen is like the child, right? When we're talking about children and how they are developed, they're usually elements of one parent or the other, or a combination of both, like I just previously mentioned, right? And it will come out. Actually, that same daughter, who I said is probably more like yours, she might actually be more like you, and she might be wanting to express herself and do things that maybe you wished you could have done back then. And whereas you had to, because you had to, fulfill certain roles and present in a certain way, and you had. So, what kind of work do you do now?
I work with Boston Project.
Okay, good. Okay, so you work with. Okay, what? When you were 17.
Yeah.
How old are you now? Sorry.
Good question. 46.
Okay, you're 46. Now, when you were 17, did you say my life aspiration is to work for Watson Parojcic?
No.
What was your life aspiration when you were 17?
I wanted to be an accountant, actually.
Oh, okay, well, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay, but okay, better count. Okay. So, but again, but sometimes people go, I wanted to be, I wanted to travel the world, or something, right? So I don't know. Like my point is that sometimes our kids, right? What we do is they become this thing, but it's either a reflection of what we were or what our dream was, and we kind of are disconnected from that because we had to kind of give it up. That just happens sometimes. You know what I'm trying to say? So I'm just trying to say that whatever your child is, celebrate their strengths, celebrate their passions, and say, you know what? It doesn't matter what you're doing. I love you. I accept you. There's nothing better than there's nothing better to give our children than acceptance. Especially if they're not doing anything that's bad, right? And and even if they use a little bit of drugs here and there, and it hasn't become harmful, right? Look, even Justin Trudeau does, right? So so there you go. We'll leave Rob Ford alone. Sorry. Question? Yeah.
Actually, I wonder if you're going to share it with us. You had mentioned earlier in your presentation that you had a situation happening in your life, an experience that really changed you spiritually.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a Vancouver Sun, and the Vancouver Sun newspaper. I had when I was growing up, I was in the street gang and all this kind of stuff. And Brian Turco was a famous rock star at the time. He was a big rock star playing with a band called Saga. And he was dating a Playboy Bunny girlfriend, Centerfold, so he kind of had what people would think would be a stereotypical celebrity big life. And he had a drug incident, and he became like a Christian guy in his particular. It doesn't matter what the faith is, but he became a Christian guy. And he became a youth worker, and he gave up all his rock and roll lifestyle to become this Christian youth worker with an organization called Teen Challenge. And when he kind of approached me as a street gang, he goes, if you put away your guns, I will teach you to play guitar. He goes, you can get as many girls with guitars as you can with guns. And I said, oh, okay, cool. And, so girls like the bad boys. So, and of course, when I saw that he had a Playboy Bunny girlfriend, I thought, okay, well, maybe I could, get one too. And so, but it is what it was. And so, but he just used that, and he didn't preach at me or anything, but he just showed love, right? He just showed love to me. He showed caring and compassion. And, the funny thing I got to tell you a story about Brian Turco, because back in those days, he could have been a big famous rock star, and to some degree he was, but after he didn't have all that anymore, he was living in East Vancouver. He would have to jog from East Vancouver to Vancouver's West End. And that's a fair hike, because he didn't have enough money for bus fare. He didn't have enough money for underwear or socks. And he would jog to work with kids like me who would tell him to go F himself and all this kind of stuff, right? And he spent this time just loving and caring. And, and he invested in me. Today, that guy, Brian Turco, is a multimillionaire coffee impresario in Vancouver with Milano's Coffee. You can go online and see him. It was featured in the Vancouver Sun newspaper story. He's friends with guys from the Tragically Hip and all this kind of thing. He just recorded a song with guys from the Tragically Hip. But, and it just goes to show you, he paid it forward with me. He's been blessed in his life. Because of him, I was blessed in my life. And it's just, how do we just perpetuate blessings for other people? So the effort that Brian made, and then of course Fred Lepkin was a teacher. Fred was interesting. He was a Jewish, gay, obese atheist, and I always say, our Creator uses whoever to make a difference in our life, because we're all created equally, and Creator can use whoever Creator wants to make that change, and so that's what it was. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just to take Greg's question one step further on not for the more thing on the Greg. Perhaps the concern for some parents, Anthony, is that when their kids don't finish high school, or aren't on the EQ side, not the IQ, but that they don't get an education. That Greg and his wife are likely concerned about her capacity to survive financially in society.
EQ and IQ are two different things. EQ and IQ are two different things. And a person can be high on the EQ and function just fine, and be high on the IQ and struggle, right? And so again, it's not to be. Look, our school system is focused on about 51% of our kids. You all know that, right? Our school system is only focused on 51% of our kids. That means 49% of our kids are left out. And so what we need to do is find what the passion of the young person is, and therein will you find their success, right? I was talking to Peter and his wife last night, and they're musicians. right? And I'm looking at, what their son is doing in the Rob Ford opera. It's on the internet. It was great. You gotta go see that. It's like the Rob Ford opera with Brent Bamberger and Brent Bamberger on CBC. And and here's some kids like his kids are musicians. I didn't see celebrating the passion. It wasn't about go and get a university degree and make something of your life. You know what? They are making a huge impact. They're featured nationally in this country. In the CBC. Rob Ford opera thing, and and I thought that's awesome. I wish there was more parents like Peter and his wife here, right, who are still together, 40 years later?
38.
Yeah, 38. Right, close enough. And it's still like a generation.
It's just a math.
Yeah, 38. It feels like 80. And the thing is, but again, and you celebrate who your kids are. That's legacy. So. Celebrate who your child is in what their strengths are. That's what, my daughter, if I got, my daughter finished a 2-year college degree in 4 years. She fit 2 years into 4. Right? Now, I had to pay for that. But, I had to pay for that. But you know what? She's learning slowly, but she's learning. Right? But you know what? All my daughter needs is that same little girl who, when she was 5 or 6 years old and said, "Daddy, are you proud of me? I'm finished swimming." She still comes to me and says, "Daddy, are you proud of me? I just got an A. I'm 26 years old and I'm still in second year university." Right? That's all they need. Just love them. Right? There's no path. For God's sakes, I didn't go back to university until I was 27. I didn't start. Do you know what I did from the time I was 19 till the time I was 27? You name the drug, you name the alcohol. I was in it. Started my day with a bottle of Jack Daniels. By the time I was 22, 23, 24. That's how I started my days. Okay? You can imagine, my mom thought I was and people thought I was messed up. I was messed up. And I had to hit a rock bottom. By the time I was 25 or so, 26. I had to hit a rock bottom. But you know what? From 27, somebody put me on that starting line. I suffered. You name it. I got everything wrong with me. But but the thing is that I started, and what I have made more money in the last 6 years of my life than most people will make in 5 lifetimes. Right? But that's because I followed a path after the fact. So there's never too late. It's never too late. But we have to instill in the passions. And once the mentors in my life saw what my passions were, they just began mentoring me in those passions. Just do this and do that now. And I learned, right? So it's not always about following the pathway that we think. It's allow people to flourish. Yeah, question? Okay.
Can you tell me what EQ means?
Emotional intelligence.
Okay.
It's the emotional intelligence of the person, right? It's that they know in their heart. If a person knows it, you know what, like I said, anxiety is the denial of doing what you know is not right for you.
Yeah, like my youngest is in therapy and it failed miserably.
Yeah, good, let her come see me. She should be seeing me. You need a better benefits package from WP.
Is your office open for new clients now?
We always treat clients. Yeah. We always take them referrals. Yeah. For sure. One of the things that I do in my therapy is because I always say we're expensive, but we're effective.
Right.
And a lot of my majority of my clients, I'd say about 80%, probably 90% of my clients usually have success after probably about 6 to 8 sessions. And the ones who come and see me more are for coaching more than therapy. Because I move from therapy to coaching. Right? I believe, like I said, therapy is about problems and obstacles and risks, and I think those things can be fixed really quickly, and then I just like to be a part of something exciting. So some of my clients, I get more into a coaching kind of relationship, because that's where it's like just being a part of whatever the cool things that they get to do are, and so that's where I see as my strength versus therapy. Right. Any more questions? One more? We got 1 more minute before 11:30. Okay, so thank you very much. If you want to see me around, my website's dranthonyhutchinson.com. You can find me on there, and my phone number's there, and let me know if you want to just sit and chat, go for a coffee. I kind of do those things, and look out for me, hopefully on Canada's Smartest Person in the fall of 2014 CBC.